The subtitle of this lesson is The Black Death, and as the name suggests, we will focus on one of the most devastating pandemics in history, the plague. This catastrophic plague swept across Europe from 1347 to 1350, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Depending on the region, the Black Death claimed the lives of up to 50% of the European population, creating a demographic disaster of unprecedented scale. But the impact of the plague went far beyond the staggering death toll. It triggered a cascade of societal upheavals, plunging Europe into an economic and social depression. Famine, disease, and widespread misery followed, creating conditions of extreme hardship. These struggles ultimately led to social unrest and even civil wars. However, before we delve into the horrors of the Black Death itself, we will first explore the broader social and economic crises that plagued the 14th century, setting the stage for this unparalleled disaster. During the High Middle Ages, traditionally dated from around 1000 to 1300, Europe experienced a remarkable period of growth, economically, technologically, culturally, and demographically. The population had been steadily increasing since the year 1000, leading to a thriving economy that fueled the rise of a burgeoning middle class, known as the bourgeoisie. European monarchies, particularly in France and England, enjoyed a period of relative stability during this time. The church, meanwhile, served as the bedrock of daily life, guiding spiritual and societal norms. The era was marked by significant power struggles such as the investiture controversy between the emperor and the pope, a conflict in which the papacy ultimately emerged victorious. However, as the 14th century dawned, Europe began to experience a widespread downturn, both economically and demographically. The continent had grown overpopulated, stretching its resources to the limit. Despite advancements in agricultural techniques, there simply wasn't enough food or work to support the rapidly expanding population. This overpopulation, combined with a series of poor harvests caused by unfavorable weather conditions between 1315 and 1320, plunged Europe into crisis. Farmers were forced to consume the very seeds meant for the next planting season, exacerbating the food shortage. In 1346 to 1347, Europe faced an unimaginable catastrophe. A merchant ship, returning from a trade voyage in the Black Sea and having docked at the Crimean Peninsula in Central Asia, made its way to the port city of Messina in Sicily. What the crew didn't know was that they were carrying a deadly cargo, not goods, but rats infested with fleas that harbored a lethal bacterium. These fleas, once aboard, left their rodent hosts and bit the humans on board, thus transmitting the plague. Europe's population, already weakened by chronic malnutrition and poor immune systems, was defenseless against this new threat. With no biological resistance and no access to effective medical treatment, people became easy prey for the rapidly spreading disease. The plague manifested in two main forms, bubonic and pneumonic. The bubonic plague caused victims to suffer from high fever, extreme fatigue, and excruciating muscle pain. Dark, swollen lumps, known as buboes, would form on the skin, spreading swiftly across the body, signaling imminent death. Less visible but even more deadly was the pneumonic plague. In this form, the bacteria attacked the lungs, causing fever, fatigue, and severe headaches. Within a day, victims would begin coughing up blood, followed by intense stomach pain and vomiting. Unlike the bubonic form, the pneumonic plague spread through the air, passed from person to person through coughing, allowing it to infect whole populations with terrifying speed. The two forms of the plague spread with alarming speed from the Black Sea to Sicily in 1347. From there, the disease moved relentlessly northward through Europe, reaching Scandinavia by 1349. It arrived in Bergen that year, and soon after, it swept through Sweden and Denmark, where it wreaked havoc from 1349 to 1350. What made the plague so terrifying was its ability to linger silently within a population, lying dormant only to erupt without warning. This unpredictability meant that communities could never feel secure, as the threat of a sudden outbreak was always looming. The plague caused a demographic collapse of unprecedented scale, leading to a complete social and economic breakdown. With fewer peasants to work the land, the basic structure of medieval society began to crumble. Naturally, due to the laws of supply and demand, surviving laborers and peasants began to demand higher wages and better prices for their work. In industries, artisans also pushed up prices, causing significant inflation and disrupting the market. Across Europe, these upheavals led to a series of political crises. Peasants and workers, facing resistance from employers who tried to freeze wages and prices, began to rise up. The struggle for economic survival thus became a breeding ground for social unrest, as the old order faced challenges from a newly empowered labor force. The Black Death didn't just decimate Europe's population, it shook the very foundations of its society, leaving a legacy of turmoil and transformation that would be felt for generations to come. In southern England, a significant peasant uprising erupted, led by the fiery priest John Ball. Driven by a powerful desire for justice, Ball and his followers made bold demands, including the abolition of serfdom, the end of church tithes, and the elimination of oppressive taxes. The peasants, emboldened by their cause, marched toward London, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake as they burned down manors and churches. Upon reaching London, the peasant army confronted King Edward, who, seemingly sympathetic, promised to consider their demands. However, as soon as the peasants retreated, the king swiftly mobilized his forces and crushed the rebellion. In the end, none of the peasants' demands were met, leaving them defeated and disillusioned. Similar uprisings echoed across Europe, including in Florence, where the woolworkers' guild known as the Ciompi rose up in revolt. Unlike the English peasants, the Ciompi initially succeeded in seizing power. From 1378 to 1381, the lower guilds took control of Florence, and during this brief period, they managed to secure concessions and improve conditions for workers. However, this victory was short-lived. By 1381, the upper classes of Florentine society, determined to regain control, orchestrated a lockout that forced the workers into submission. The ruling elite re-established their dominance, and the Ciompi revolt was quelled, marking the end of a fleeting chapter of worker empowerment in Florence. During the widespread economic depression that gripped Europe, the nobility found themselves entangled in a web of political conflicts. Their once stable incomes plummeted drastically, forcing many nobles to seek alternative sources of wealth to maintain their lavish lifestyles. One of the most enticing ways to secure additional income was through government positions, which promised both power and financial stability. However, the number of available offices was far fewer than the number of nobles vying for them, leading to a fierce and relentless struggle for control. This desperation for power and resources ignited bitter rivalries among noble factions who began to clash with one another, not just politically, but militarily. These internal conflicts often escalated into full-blown battles, further destabilizing the already fragile economies of their regions. The ensuing violence only deepened the economic crisis, hastening the collapse of societal structures. In England, this noble infighting culminated in the prolonged and bloody Wars of the Roses. Unlike the struggles over government offices seen elsewhere, the Wars of the Roses were a battle for the ultimate prize, the English throne itself. The conflict, which pitted the houses of Lancaster and York against each other, was not just a war for power, but a fight for the very future of the kingdom. These conflicts, driven by the nobility's desperation to secure their status and wealth, left deep scars across Europe. The noble struggles exacerbated the economic turmoil of the time, turning what was already a period of hardship into an era of profound upheaval and transformation. The severe financial troubles faced by medieval monarchies were deeply intertwined with the escalating costs of warfare. The 14th century saw dramatic changes in military technology, with the introduction of powerful new weapons such as the crossbow, longbow, and early firearms. These innovations rendered the traditional knight, once the backbone of medieval armies, increasingly obsolete. The longbow and crossbow could penetrate even the heaviest armor, while firearms began to revolutionize the battlefield. However, these advanced weapons came with a steep price tag, placing enormous financial pressure on the crown. As the king's income from his estates and taxes dwindled, he turned to his nobles, demanding ever larger contributions to fund the growing expenses of war. The nobility, however, resisted these demands, unwilling or unable to bear the increased financial burden. This resistance began to erode the feudal relationship that had long defined the bond between the king and his vassals. Facing dwindling support from his nobles, the king often resorted to hiring mercenaries to fill the ranks of his armies. While mercenaries offered a temporary solution, they were costly and lacked the loyalty that feudal lords might have provided. These hired soldiers were motivated by profit rather than allegiance, making them unreliable in the long term. As a result of these financial and military challenges, monarchs found themselves embroiled in a series of costly and protracted wars. These conflicts drained the royal coffers, further destabilizing the monarchy's ability to govern effectively. The king's authority weakened as he struggled to maintain control over his realm, leading to a period of political instability and unrest. This shift in the nature of warfare and the resulting financial strain marked a turning point in medieval Europe. The traditional feudal system began to crumble, giving way to new forms of military organization and governance. The king's reliance on mercenaries and his inability to secure sufficient support from the nobility set the stage for the gradual decline of feudalism and the rise of centralized nation-states in the centuries to come. One of the most notorious of these prolonged conflicts was the Hundred Years' War, a devastating struggle between England and France that raged from 1337 to 1453. This war, rooted in a bitter dispute over the French throne, not only drained the resources of both kingdoms, but also significantly weakened the English and French monarchies. The origins of this epic conflict lie in a complex web of claims and counterclaims to the French crown, a struggle that would ignite one of the longest and most brutal wars in European history. The war's impact was profound, reshaping the political landscape of both nations and leaving scars that would last for generations. But the story of the Hundred Years' War and its far-reaching consequences is only the beginning. In our next lesson, we will dive deeper into this monumental conflict and explore the intricate details that fueled it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Academy of History and Culture for more fascinating insights into the Age of the Renaissance and beyond. Stay tuned as we uncover the pivotal events that shaped our world.